Blanchard's been a member of the club. Jeff Blanchard's been a member of the club for a lot of years and has presented on his travels throughout North America. And it's really great to have him back. And this is an area that he's talking about tonight that I have not been to. So it'll be really interesting for me and hopefully for everybody else. And we'll be really get ready to start that. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jeff Blanchard. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Welcome tonight, guys. I'm happy that we're both meeting in person and in Zoom. I know in the past it's only been Zoom, but it's fun to see people here again, getting back to some sense of normality. As the last talk I had was birding during the pandemic. So it's apt that I'm back here now talking about this. Hopefully we are past the pandemic. I entitled this Birding in the Land of the Midnight Sun. I was fortunate this past July to take a trip up north. And let me start the show here. Okay. So anyways, a little bit about me here. I use Canon equipment. I'm currently using a Canon EOS R5, which is a full frame, mirrorless, minimum 45 megapixel. So it's a pretty big camera. I can get a lot of decent pictures and I have a lot of pixels to work with. So a lot of times what you're seeing is a picture using with a 500 millimeter lens, which is in the picture there. And I'm getting pretty close from a pretty fair distance away. And then I can crop in more than 50%, sometimes even 70, 80% to get some great pictures. You think probably think I'm 20 feet from the bird or the animal, but no, I'm usually a lot further back than that. For those of you who are interested, I do have a public Flickr site, which you do not have to be a member of that to see the Flickr. I don't believe you can go to that site and you'll be able to see albums which I've arranged either by trips or by bird families of what I've seen and some mammals as well. And if you're on Facebook, you can again see my photos. They are public for the most part. So you can just go there and look, or you can follow me, or if I know you and you know me, send me a friend request and I'll be happy to set it up as well. But there's no pressure. I don't have to say, people, you have to be my friend. You can just follow me if you just want to see the pictures that I post. So just to give a little bit of geography for those who maybe aren't fully aware of what we do here. Sorry, of where I was. So from Boston, I flew up to Toronto and then out to Edmonton, Alberta. And then from there is where we took a flight into Yellowknife, which is this little pointer on here, right? Oh, there we go. Oh, that's excellent. Okay. Yeah, so I flew to Edmonton, Alberta. We actually did spend a day there, but I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus more on the trip up here to Yellowknife, which is on this beautiful Great Slave Lake. Slave being actually an Indian word, slave. It's not really slave, but that's how people pronounce it. It's not, it has nothing to do with slavery, but it's called the Great Slave Lake. And then from Yellowknife, I went to Cambridge Bay, which is this is Victoria Island. It's just, you see it, all of it is within the Arctic Circle. Now, a couple of facts I'd love to share that people may not know is that Canada has more lakes than the rest of the world, more lakes than anywhere combined, which is why it's a great place for birds that go up there to breed and nest up there. Now, some people also ask, well, what does the Arctic Circle denote? I mean, what does that circle mean? Well, what that means is that anywhere in the Arctic Circle, there is at least one full day of 24-hour sun during the summer solstice, or there's at least one full day of darkness in the winter solstice. So at the very edge of that circle, which by the way, can move a few miles every year because of the wobble of the earth. But basically, if you're on that circle, you're guaranteed at least one day where you won't see the sun at all. That's, the winter solstice in one day when you'll have full sun 24 hours a day. Now, when I went up to Yellowknife, so there, the sun did set for like 3 hours a day, but it set just below the horizon, so the sky was still light. It was still, twilight, not even quite twilight, but basically like silver light, as you know here. But then once we got to Cambridge Bay, which is inside the circle, the weeks I was there, they go from roughly May to May to July, late July, in 6 weeks around the solstice, where they will have constant 24-hour sun. And then of course, as you move away from that, it's maybe an hour of no sun, but it's still light because the sun's just below the horizon, but we still have light. And Cambridge Bay is 1,444 miles from the North Pole. So that's the closest I got to the North Pole, a little over 1,000 miles. Here is a photo of Cameron Falls. And it's a real beautiful falls, which is in the Yellowknife area. It's 60 feet high. It's in the Hidden Lake Territorial Park. It's a big, huge area, thousands of acres. And this river flows through it and falls over these beautiful falls, which they have wonderful trails. There's like 3 or 4 different trails to get there. And that was certainly a highlight of one of our hiking days out there, to see this beautiful waterfall. Yellowknife is the capital and the only city and the largest community in the Northwest Territories. So that's, everybody goes through there. And even if you're going further north, everything goes through Yellowknife to get up to the other areas of Nunavut. So without any further ado, let's go into some of the birds, which is the reason why I went up there, to see some birds that I probably haven't seen a lot of them before, or if I do, it's just to briefly as they're migrating up, and or also the beauty of this is you get to see these birds in breeding plumage, which is, as you know, their most colorful plumage. So here is a Bonaparte's gull, and it is one of the only species of gulls that will nest in trees. Most other gulls will go on the rocks and ledges and have colonies, but this is one of the few birds that will nest in a tree. And so it's mostly these evergreen, but I believe I did see a nest in another oak type tree. I don't think they have a particular favorite that I'm aware of, but there's definitely more evergreens up there than there are other types of trees. What's interesting about the Bonaparte's gull is here's a chick, which is probably only a week or so out of the nest. So they're hatched in the nest, but they don't stay in the nest very long. I believe once the last egg hatches, I don't know if the parents scoop them out somehow, but they basically drop from the tree, and then they go into the trees that the nest on are always around water, and they will drop into the ponds and the swamps, and they'll hide instant among the reeds. And that's the weird thing. When they first go there, we saw them, the parents would fly up. I mean, they would literally fly 20 feet above your head. They're checking you out. You wonder why, and also you see them dive down, go in there, and the chicks would come out. and they'll be feeding the chicks. And here is another view of the Bonaparte Gull. One of these beautiful thing about being there, the sun is often so low, it just gives you incredible angles of light in photography. I mean, that was really one of the fun things, just to go out at any time. I probably was out. If I wasn't out with my group, a couple of us just went out walking after dinner for hours, and we didn't, we stayed up to like midnight, 1 o'clock, sleep for a couple of hours, and off the very next day. But the lighting is just incredible when the sun's always kind of at that low angle when you're up there. Obviously midday it is high, but most of the day it's always at a nice, beautiful 20-degree angle, giving you some great light. And this just shows off the beautiful eye of the Bonaparte Gull. It really stands out as you're swimming right along. So they'll be in trees, they'll be flying, they'll be swimming in the water. They were everywhere. Really a very numerous gulls at Yellowknife. This is a short-billed gull. And up until last year, it was considered a subspecies of the mew gull, but it has in a sense been separated. So some people will still call this a mew gull. Really beautiful dusky eye, a dusky iris with a red orbital ring that stands out, and that really short, unmarked yellow beak. That's really very distinctive. It also has a beautiful. You can't really see it here, but maybe you can. It's very barely you can see that has a red gape. The red gape is the part where the bill meets the mouth. There's a little line, and it's actually red. That stand out. We were able to rent a little dinghy boat, and we went out onto Yellowknife Bay. And there's several islands out there, just rocky outcrops, and this is where the other gulls were nesting in their colonies. So here is the ring-billed gull, the 2 adults and 4 chicks. And as you can imagine, the place is just loaded with them everywhere on the rocks, making quite the ruckus. Oh yeah, there's one. Yeah, one behind the adult up there. Yeah, that was just in the picture. Like I said, literally there probably were hundreds of babies across this little rock, which the rock itself wasn't even a quarter mile. No, I think it's just that's just a shadow. I think it's just a shadow showing that. Of course, as you can see, the lichen all over the rocks, as well as plenty of excrement from the birds. And then, in contrast to the ring-billed here on a different rock outcropping, probably about 1,000 feet away, the herring gulls had this rock colonized. They don't mix. They find their own places and they stay in their own little colonies. And so here is some, I guess you could say, cute young herring gulls. And then we move on from the gulls into some of the other waterfowl that we saw here. Here is a female canvasback and ducklings that were splashing around with mom, playing nice and calmly on an evening. It's interesting that the males don't really hang around. Once they have copulated and the eggs are there, the males take off, and it's just left for mom to take care of the birds. There's nothing else. I actually don't think I saw several females with chicks up there, but I didn't see any males. They were already gone. I believe their clutch can be more. I'm not sure about the averages. So this one has 3. The other one we saw had 6. So nothing like the mergansers, who who they were there, and I think there's one family of like 24 mergansers. But the mergansers will also combine their chicks, so it could be multiple parents, multiple mothers, and they'll bring all their chicks together, and they'll stay together in their little flock. The most common duck that I saw up at Yellowknife was the lesser skull. This is our lesser. It's difficult to differentiate between the lesser and the greater. It has to do with the shape of the head is a really key characteristic. I think the greater is a bit flatter. This one has a little bit of more of a high rising head. And of course, they also look similar to what we see down here as far as ringneck ducks. But a ringneck duck would have a white mark on the bill, would really stand out, as well as probably a bit more of a pronounced neck. Lesser scallop, S-C-A-U-P, scallop. I don't think I mean, everyone's got different pronunciations sometimes, I know. But love their eyes. Their eyes just bang, they just stick out. Those beautiful yellow eyes catch you. Now, this was one of my target things. One of the target reasons to go up there is the grebes. Saw all the grebes up there that we would typically see in the east, the Midwest of the East. This is our horn grebe, which you differentiate them. You see those little tufts, those little white tufts. They can also be more yellowish in some of them. Just depends on the plumage. They're similar to the eared grebe, but the eared grebe has more of a more down, a little bit lower, and it's actually in breeding plumage. It's quite a spectacular difference. It's like little feathers shoot out versus having that big tuft up there. This guy, we were on the trail, and this guy swam out, and it was like literally 15, 20 feet in front of us along the trail, just swimming around, looking at us in our small group. But then after we kind of was dispersing, he went right into the reeds. So I do suspect that he had a nest, or was with a female with a nest inside the reeds, are just out of sight here from behind. So a couple times later on, when I was walking the trails, he was always there. So I was pretty sure there's probably a nest back there. And here is what later on could have been the female to that male. Excuse me. But here is the horn grebe female with 2 chicks. And even this young, they were already swimming around and diving, learning how to dive in the water. But most of the time it was mom going down and bringing back stuff up to the young ones and feeding them. The horn grebe, as well as other grebes, will very frequently feed the babies feathers. Like feathers or vegetation. And the reason they do that is because they want the babies to lie in their gut and form a plug. It's really a plug so that they can deal with the bones and things that they eat, and it won't hurt their digestive systems. Yep. Essentially, I mean, when you first see it, you go, why are they feeding them the feather? But actually, I've seen loons do the same thing. Loons do a similar thing. Yep, they'll pick off a feather, maybe a loose feathers floating by. They'll just grab it and they'll feed the chick. Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting behavior to watch that happen. Well, the other grebe that I was able to capture was the redneck grebe, and they're wonderful because, as you can see, with a redneck grebe, they do allow their chicks to come onto their bodies and float with them. These are a little bit younger than the horn grebes you saw previously. Here's a doting mother taking care of them as they're tucked in. But as I watch them, you know, they're not there very long. Sometimes they do sleep. Sometimes the mom will just close her eyes and she'll sleep, and the babies will sleep. And then 10 minutes later, she'll get up and she'll flap. She really will get up to flap. The babies just roll off her back. And then they'll float around, and then eventually one will climb back on whatever they're doing. Yeah, this one is 2. I believe their clutch size is small. I believe, you know, 2 to 4. I don't know. I didn't see the male do that. As you'll see here, here is the male coming over. A lot of times, I saw this male coming in and bringing, as he had just brought. So I wasn't sure if that was an eel or if that was just some kind of a vegetation, but he just brought that to the chick in the middle. There's a mouthful for that chick to try and, but it did it. It choked it down. So the female is a little bit bigger, larger body size. Just comparison of the body size. There's no real. Also, in theory, plumage-wise, the male is usually darker and richer of a color with breeds. So all this time I was watching, it was this scenario, but I do believe that the male will take the chicks as well. I don't, and then the female can go off and have a little free time for herself. So I believe they do take turns. But I was watching these guys for about an hour in between feeding and sleeping and doing a few things. It was wonderful to watch them. So the other target species I had were the loons that we typically don't see here. Here is a photo of a red-throated loon. And this red-throated loon right now is sitting on a nest. And if you look, I don't know if you've already seen it yet, but there's a little baby. And this pair only had 1 chick. When we came upon this little lake, we saw them swimming with this 1 chick, and there was no other. But they did go back to the nest just to rest for a while the other adult was off getting fish. It was not staying in the nest. No, it was already out. But that is the nest that they were using, and they when we first spotted them, they were out in the water, and then we probably made them kind of go back and into the area and kind of tuck themselves in, and then as we were quietly there, after a while, they came out. They realized that we weren't a threat to them. The green's probably the grass. He or she is really tucked in there, but you can definitely see the red on the higher part of the neck, which is where they get their name, red-throated. And they are the smallest of the loons. They're smaller and more slender, and that gives them the advantage of being able to populate smaller lakes. The red-throated loons do not need to paddle to get airborne. These guys can literally go boom, boom, and they're in the air. And of course, as you probably, if you know, other loons cannot do that. So that means that they have to be on bigger bodies of water. They have to have enough room to take off. Yeah. Well, the loon, they are, maybe different pitch and different things, but they're all fairly similar. While we were there, we really didn't hear very many loons calling because, with the exception of when they were on territory and if they thought there was, I'll talk about that when we get to the yellow-billed loons. And so while they were there in the nest, this one came in with a fish to feed the baby. And ironically, he chased the baby around, and for some reason the baby wasn't interested at this time. So the adult kind of went off for a while and came back, tried again, and then eventually just ate the fish. I'm not sure if it was too big. It definitely looks like it's pretty big for that little baby. And, you know, it's quite possible that he was trying the big fish and the baby just didn't want anything to do with it. But this picture, you can see the beautiful red throat. Which is why I definitely love to grab this picture, because it just really shows that striking throat. And, you know, there was one spotted recently on a lake here in Massachusetts, but they've lost all that color when they're coming back. And the really thing that discerns these is obviously their size. They're very thin bill when you compare them to our more common ones that are around here. And you can probably imagine that they are the smallest loon. So because of that, they actually do not let their babies on their backs. Unlike we've seen other things, other loons will let their babies come on their backs. These are the smallest ones, the slightest ones. So they say, no, none of that. So you will not see that behavior with the red-throated loons. In contrast, this is, I did have some difficulty getting anywhere near Pacific loons. So these are two Pacific loon adults with one baby in the middle, who's already several weeks old. It looks by this point. So the Pacific loon and the red-throated loon that you saw previously, they are similar in size. So both of these are on the smaller size as compared to our common loon, is even bigger than this guy. But the Pacific loon is a heavier bird, about 1/3 heavier. So they will need more room to take off. So they have to be on bigger lakes. That red-throated loon was on a pond. I'd call it a pond. It was really just a pond on the side of the road. When we get to here now, we're talking about ponds or lakes that are probably twice as big as the one I saw the red-throated loon on. And they simply need it to take off. They gotta paddle, much like common loons around here. They're gonna paddle and they're doing this for probably 100 yards before they can even get airborne. They're in, other than size, which I really couldn't tell you from here, the plumage is the same. And that's pretty common for all of our loons. The plumage is the same in males and females. So unless you get them really close together and you can, there is probably some size difference, but I would never. That's a good point. And all loons will do that. All loons can control the amount of air they have as far as how high they want to ride in the water or how low. And you'll notice that when the babies are really young, they'll come in low, come down real low to feed the real young ones. But yeah, they have a very controlled air system. They can just bring air into their air sacs. Yep. So they'll always adjust that. And it's also a posture. It'll be a posturing thing if there's other loons around and they want to be big and they want to protect their territory. They will posture. Here is a soarer, a bird that we do have around here. We can find around here. They're a very secretive bird, obviously. They're basically the most abundant and widespread rail in North America. And of course, you would know that because you don't see them a lot. They're very secretive. All the rails in general are very secretive. We happen to be walking around on the very little pond swamp area near our hotel. First thing to do is you hear them first. So we heard them. We kind of walked around. We heard it come from over there. We kind of looked around, and this guy popped out, and he actually eventually came up onto the pavement path and walked down the pavement. I'm like, where's he going? And we got into a little bit of a barking match with another bird. I don't even remember if it was a crow or something. It was unusual to see. I mean, I barely even see them. I hear them all the time, and this guy comes walking up in daylight and just walks on the walking path while looking at them. Holy moly. Yeah, Interesting for that bird. And red-winged blackbirds, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. They're up there too. They're making their noise. I just love this photo of a couple of females in the cattails. And they're just sitting there singing, watching us walk by. They are everywhere. Here is a lesser yellowlegs. As you know, we have lesser and greater yellowlegs, which we do see here, and it's tough to figure them out. Except you have to go by the size of the beak, how long that beak is, really is a key factor. But up here, they're only going to get lesser yellowlegs up in Yellowknife. The greatest go somewhere else to nest. And interesting enough that the lesser yellowlegs is actually more closely related to the willet than it is to the greater yellowlegs. So again, some of the weird facts that we find out, we dig into these birds and we go, you think, well, it must be a close cousin, must be closer to the willet. Yeah, very close, very close. And here is classic. This is a classic defensive posture for lesser yellowlegs. There was a young one down below, and they will jump up to the highest spot, and they'll just do an alarm call at you, and just as their way to say, get out of here, you're in my territory. So we were there walking around. We saw him jump up that tree, start squeaking away, and then we started walking past him, and we saw him dive down to a log, and there was a young one out there. We go, oh, that's the reason why he's so excited. Here is the Canada jay, or also used to know it as the gray jay, or the whiskey jack, they call it up in Canada. And the interesting thing that I found out about this bird is it actually uses its sticky saliva, and it kind of pastes or glues its food under leaves and branches. That's how it stores its food for the winter. So I don't know that behavior. Of course, we also know the behavior is they will eat out of your hand. They're very bold, and they'll be around camps. They'll be around campsites looking for food, looking for handouts. They're very smart birds, as far as I know. And then here is a spruce grouse. And this is the female. So as we were very lucky as we were walking along this path, she popped up, and then we looked beyond her and we saw the little chicks running away, scurrying into the woods. But she stood there for 5-10 minutes. We were watching her, she was watching us, took a few pictures, and then we moved on. But I could barely get her in my frame. I mean, we were probably 20 feet away, and I had my big lens on, and it's just amazing. Stood there, and eventually we started walking on, and she just jumped off and went after her chicks. So that was in Yellowknife. So from Yellowknife, I flew up to Cambridge Bay. As I mentioned before, they do enjoy 24-hour sunshine from May 20th to July 23rd. So it's about 6 weeks. Of course, they'll get, the flip side is they'll get no sun from November 20th to January 23rd. The 6 weeks around the winter solstice. And what was amazing about the tundra is that these wildflowers, purples, yellows, whites, everywhere, it's like a carpet of wildflowers anywhere we looked, along with all the lakes that are on there. And yet there are these rocks everywhere. It's kind of, if I ever thought of like walking on the moon, this is what it kind of would feel like. whenever we would go out, we would just see beautiful wildflowers, and of course that's where the insects are. Up there now, we're getting into the area where there's lots of mosquitoes, which is great for the birds. Great for the birds. This is why a lot of the birds love going up there. There's plenty of food up there. As you can see in the distance, the central feature of Cambridge Bay and actually Victoria Island is this distinctive mountain, which is called Obayok in the native language. English people call it Mount Pelly. And they call it a mountain, but it's really only 650 feet high. But it's just a long abutment that stands out there, and it's part of their park up there. And there's several hiking trails, and people love to go up there and hike and look. And the view from up there, which we didn't do, but we hear the view up there was beautiful. Look out. Another thing I want to mention is that the average July temperature is 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Right? It's cool. Cool by our standards. But as you know, with climate change happening, we were up there the whole time we were up there, and the couple weeks before, and even a few weeks after, we were like at 75 degrees. Yeah, it even topped out at almost hit 80 one day, which is, that's not good. It's the warming's up there. It was one of the earliest times that they had no ice out on the bay. So it does affect things out there. It does affect things out there when you actually get up there to see it. No, there should have been ice until August. So in typical years, when the ice melts around August, and that's when the Great Northwest Passage, when all the boats start coming up and down there, they cut through there, they deliver all the supplies, come into Cambridge Bay. Like in that span of 3 to 4 weeks, that's when they do all of their stocking up for the winter months. So the bay was not totally open yet, but there was, it should have been almost totally iced, and yet it wasn't. We could look out in the areas around the land where it came into land, it was probably clear of ice for about 200 feet. And the ice should have been all the way up to the shore. Yeah, this past summer. Yeah. But yeah, definitely firsthand can see the differences that are affecting all of us everywhere in the world. So onto the birds that I saw up in Cambridge Bay. This is a glaucous gull. It's one of the largest gulls next to our blackback gull. It's the second largest gull, basically. And yeah, they're bullies. They're bullies. They will be out there raiding other nesting birds, as well as we found a bunch of them naturally by the dump. Up there. But of course, they are beautiful in their own right. They have a nice clear yellow iris. You can see that as compared with some of the other gulls, and they also that red orbital ring. The eyes really jump out at you with these gulls. Like I said, they are serious predators up there. They are one of the biggest predators up there next to the jaegers. This, in my opinion, was one of the most beautiful gulls I've ever seen. It's the Sabine's gull. And, if there's ever a prize for best makeup, I'd give it to this gull with a little mustard tip of the beak, the black beak, and the red ring around the eye. Beautiful bird. Interesting fact about this bird is that this bird will act like a plover, when there's danger near the nest. It will actually try to lead prey away with a sort of a broken wing display, which is unique. I mean, most gulls just go fly off, but these guys must have learned from the plovers how to do that. And it's very closely related to the ivory gull, as far as any other gull that might be in the area. If you do not see any ivory gulls, those tend to be a lot further north. And this guy, to me, had the most beautiful eye. It's really, I'm not sure if it comes in clearly up there, but stunning eye of this Iceland gull. This is an Iceland gull referred to as the Thayer's subspecies. So there's, I know this has gone back and forth over the years, but they've been divided up into the Iceland, the Kumalines, and the Thayer's subspecies. And it's all differences are subtle about the colors of their wingtips and other things, which I almost don't like getting into that minutia. It's safe to say that I was able to see an Iceland gull, and we did identify it, not me, but one of our trip leaders did identify it as the Thayer's. Here's an American pipit. It is one of the very few species of songbirds that nest in both the Arctic tundra and the alpine meadows. So it really is not picky. It'll choose either area to nest. We are very lucky to see them here, usually in the fall. Usually in the fall, some of them will come through. I know 2 weeks ago, I saw some over at Wachusett Reservoir, Gate 37. And they've been seen up along the coast as well, like up at Plum Island. Fall is the best time to spot them, I think, as far as when they're heading back. Another passerine is the Lapland longspur. And this is a male, a breeding male. Again, we typically don't see these colors when they're here in Massachusetts because they're either going up or they're coming back, and they'll be more brownish. They'll lose that stuff behind the rufous coloring on their neck. During the summer, they eat an estimated 3,000 to 10,000 seeds and insects per day. And then plus they feed their young nesting chicks an additional 3,000 insects a day. So they are busy. And when we were out there, this was just constantly out there. When we're walking out there in the tundra, we had to be careful because we would literally almost step on nests. We walked very carefully whenever we could. It was quite obvious when you were near a nest because one of the adults would come up on a rock and they would, squeak at you, and then they would circle around you and keep on alarming call at you. And we figured out, oh, be careful, guys, there must be a nest around here. And for those of you who don't know, they're called longspurs because this and other members of this family actually have a toe that comes off the back and a very long nail, which is their long spur. It's a long claw that's on the back of their feet, unique to that. And this is why it's dangerous to walk on the tundra. Can you see the baby bird here? They blend in so well. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I mean, there was cases when we literally were like about to take one step, and then you saw it jump up and run. Like, whoa! Because they're not really in a nest anymore. When the eggs are laid, they're just laid. They're laid in a scrape. But when they hatch, they'll start moving around very, very, very quickly. And they, of course, their instinct is to stay still when there's a threat. They stay still when the parents fly around and try to lead away the predators. But that's the baby. Yeah. Most birds that just do scrapes, as soon as the last egg has hatched, they'll be off. They'll be off and they'll run around. Not precocial like a plover, who as soon as they're born, they're up and they're around and they're basically almost feeding themselves. They can go find their own insects. They will hatch and then they'll kind of be around the nest area, but they aren't afraid to move. They won't just stay on that scrape. And the other passerine that was up there in bountiful supply is the horned lark. And here's a horned lark female, a little bit less vibrant colored than the male. And though they're very common up there, they have undergone a very sharp decline in the past decade. The numbers are definitely taking, for some reason, they're taking a harder hit than some birds. I don't know why personally, but it's one of those species that they're definitely keeping a close eye on. And we'll get them here in our falls and winters as well. They come down here and they'll stick around. And here's another baby. Again, as you can see, they blend so well in to the tundra. This is the baby baby horned lark chick. And we did, again, we walked along and we saw several of these pop up. Here is a snow bunting. Now, we do see snow buntings around here in the winter time, but they're never like this. This was in my top 3 of this is what I wanted to see. I wanted to see a snow bunting in breeding plumage. It's just so unique from how we see them down here. They're just brown and they look like a sparrow, a little bit more fancy than the sparrow, but up there, the males are in this plumage. And you can see this guy is hopping along this little river or riverlet by the ocean and picking up the insects. He's got a mouthful of insects already. And these guys are just going to be busy up and down, constantly bringing back food. If not to the hatched young, they will also bring back all the food for the female. The female stays on the eggs. She does not leave the eggs. So he's feeding her if she's still on the eggs. Now, there's another real cool fact about the buntings is that when they come back here, they're a different plumage. But it's not because they molted. Okay? So what happens is when they fly up early in the spring, when there's still snow around, the males rub their bodies. They rub off the tips of their feathers to expose the white. So it's not like on their way up, they lost the brown feathers and grew in white feathers. It's actually the same feathers. You know, they get up there, they rub it off. It's a unique, crazy. I'm like, wow, I don't know of any other bird that does that. Here's another one in the same area, but look at that mouthful. I mean, this all these guys do all day, and all day long means all day long. They're just going to find the abundance up there of the insects up there, which is their main food source. Here is a greater white-fronted goose. We saw a few of them. Probably less than a handful, but they're up and about. I did see a couple of mating pairs with young, way off in the distance. This guy was one of the closer guys that was near us. And here are a couple of tundra swans. We did see a couple pairs of these guys. Usually they're very territorial, so you know, there'll be one on a lake and that will be it. You have to go look, as you look further down, you find another lake and there might be another pair on that one. But they definitely claim a territory. I don't think these guys were on a nest this year. It looks like they were pretty much just by themselves. Either, I'm not sure if it was a failed nest or they just decided not to breed. As you know, some birds can decide it's not a good year, I don't feel like breeding, then they cannot breed. Again, climate change has affected that. Here is an Arctic tern. One of the beautiful birds that is amazingly how it will travel from here, its Arctic breeding grounds, all the way to Antarctica, on the other side of the globe, way down under. They travel about 25,000 miles. One of the longest migrations that we know of.
We go from summer up here.
The summer down there, yeah. Yeah, I would believe that. Incredible swimmers, incredible flyers. Here we just saw this guy. We were driving on one of the 3 dirt roads that lead out of Cambridge Bay, and we came to this place where there was this piping under the road to one little stream. And he was just sitting there. We occasionally go down and pick off an insect and whatnot. Close range. I mean, again, normally on this trip, you could see them flying all around, but they were way at distance. And again, we occasionally got lucky, and there'd be one 20 feet from us, which is awesome. Also for the photography. Then we get into the other things that are beautiful up there, and the Jaegers they are incredible birds, which most people only see when they're out in the ocean on pelagic trips. So it's incredible to see this species and another species up there on land and chilling out. Here's a long-tailed jaeger. You see those 2 lovely plumes coming off the back of his tail, very distinctive. These birds catch lemmings while they're up there, and they will also raid other birds' nests. They are predators up there. And the reason why we don't see them on land very much is because they're typically spend 75% of their life out over the ocean. Yeah, they only come in to breed. Yes, and they'll sleep on the wing. They'll do what a lot of those type of birds do, is they have the ability to put half their brain on sleep and the other half is awake. It's just a unique thing about these birds. And so, yeah, they're always on the wing. And they figured out a way to get their rest somehow. Shut off one half of the brain, and the other half of the brain. I don't know how they figured it out, but that is the truth. That is the truth. Yeah, I don't know. I think both sides must get fed. And here's the other jaeger that is up there. This is the parasitic jaeger. You can tell it doesn't have a long tail, jaeger, and their cap is a much more dusky brown versus the dark black of this long tail. So those are some of the key things there. We weren't sure if they were near a nest or on a nest. We were driving by, they were probably a good 100 feet off the road. We stopped for a few pictures, trying to watch the behavior. And then we saw a couple of the longtails actually came down and landed near them too. But we weren't sure if they were guarding a nest or what, but we watched them for 15, 20 minutes and then we left them alone. Another bird that we can see here on our coast, but not in this beautiful plumage typically, is the American golden plover. And striking bird when it's in this kind of plumage, the gold flecks on its back. Otherwise, very similar to a black-bellied plover as well. Now, like many of the shorebirds, the adult American golden plovers leave the Arctic in early summer once they're done, the chicks, once they're done breeding, they'll leave the young ones behind, and then they'll follow them a few weeks later. It's kind of like, okay, we're leaving. We'll see you, you know, in a couple of weeks. And many of them basically fly offshore the East Coast. And once they get offshore on the East Coast, they fly all the way to South America in one trip. They don't stop anywhere. Incredible. Again, more birds that do incredible things that I'm not sure that there's a human equivalent to their endurance. Amazing. And like plovers, all plovers do, here is our broken wing display. The story here is that we're in our van driving the road and someone goes, oh, look, there's a golden plover. And we get out, take some pictures. The nest was literally 15 feet off next to the road, which we didn't know initially. We got out, we took some pictures. It gave that display, so we're like, uh-oh, we know we're either near a nest or that we're near some young. So we kind of, you know, backed away, moved a little bit further down the road, watched it, took some pictures, and then we saw it eventually walk back to its nest and sit down. So, and the nest was, like I said, 15 feet off the road. Again, cars probably might drive by that once a week. It really didn't care. It was not a high density thing. But sometimes, you know, they don't care whether, you know, they find their appropriate spot. They don't know that there's a dirt road 15 feet in front of them. You know. King eider, male king eider. It is one of the most ornately adorned ducks in the world. And you can see why. The colors are fantastic. We saw lots of them. There were lots of them out in the bay, swimming around in big flocks. We never really got close to them. And then one evening, we're just walking along the edge, and this guy comes swimming in all by himself, almost curious about us. We kind of sat down and he just would do his display, get up, shake his water off his feathers, go back down again. For 20, 30 minutes, he sat there and watched. And he was just chilling out. And as we left, he eventually came on shore. So I guess he was just looking for a place to park it for a while. Not this time, no, he was all by himself. And like I said, all the other times we saw flocks, even, you know, we couldn't get even close enough for a decent shot. As soon as they saw us, the whole group would start turning away and swimming away from us. See this guy come out, so we're like, oh, look at this guy. So yeah, definitely have a bit of luck on our side. Love the little tufts on the back. The feathers go up in little tufts and then the little tail as well. And you can see one of his legs in the back there. Definitely have very, very rear centered legs. Not in the middle of the body, but way at the back. Like a lot of diving ducks have. Here is a stilt sandpiper, again in beautiful breeding plumage, just foraging along the edge of a pond. They also migrate all the way to South America. This is the Baird's or Bard's sandpiper. They have a nice long tapered wing, which is pretty unique to any other kind of sandpiper. And it's adapted because they too fly a very long way. They go all the way to the tip of South America. So they love to have those long wings. And that's probably from here, from the Arctic down there is over 9,000 miles. And they make the trip in 5 weeks, which is the fastest migration. So they're the speed demons of migration. They'll take off and they'll get to the tip of South America, 9,000 miles in about 5 weeks. Another photo of the Bard sandpiper. I mean, coming up on a beautiful moss rock in the field of wildflowers. And this type of beauty was everywhere. It's tough to just grab one picture and say that this is everywhere you looked, walking around the tundra. It felt like a different world out there. Here is a semi-palmated sandpiper. This was the other sandpiper that was breeding up there. You can tell the giveaway is the little webbing between their toes, which is where they get the name semi-palmated. Palmated meaning the webbing in the toes. And this one was up, alerting at us. And there's good reason why, because one of his little chicks was nearby. You see him? He's down there. Again, blending in so well with the Arctic tundra. Very lucky up there just to have both. Actually, I saw all three phalaropes species up there. The Wilsons, which we saw actually in Yellowknife. But when we got up here to the Arctic Circle, we got the other two. In this case, this is the red phalarope. This is the male. And in phalaropes, it's the males who take care of the chicks. The females, after the eggs have hatched, she leaves. And now it's obviously quite reversed for most species of birds. But the male takes care of the chicks. And this one had 3 chicks. And I waited patiently for this guy to swim between these 2 tufts of grass in the water. And he came out, he swam across, and the others also followed. I'm sorry? July. Yeah, this is July, yep. Well, again, up there, they're going to try and feed themselves, and yeah, literally, you know, at least by 8 weeks later, they need to be ready to go. So by the time September comes around, they got ready to go. Yes, yeah. I mean, yeah. So they grow fast, eat up all the way to September, then they're traveling down here, and that's probably the phenomenon. If you do get out on a pelagic trip, and you just see these loads of phalaropes, and they just all swim in circles. They're a funny bird because they swim in circles.
Hear what the audience is saying.
I'll
Gonna
have to
repeat
repeat.
what they said.
Thank you. Yeah. So as Jeff was saying, yeah, we get a lot of these birds here in August off the coast because they've left the breeding grounds in September and they're on their way south. Now here is a red-necked phalarope. So you can see the differences. The red phalarope has got red all over the neck, all around the neck, and then down to the body. And the red neck just has that patch on the back of his neck, which gets his name. But again, they're similar, and once they leave and they head back south, they become a rather dull gray bird. As a matter of fact, I think they're called the gray phalarope over in England, because by the time they get over to England in the off season, they've lost all their color. And here you can see down in the corner is a picture of a nest of a Pacific loon. I want to give you the idea of a little mound that that Pacific loon is on. And that's just a little spit that came out in between these 2 bodies of water. So that's incubating eggs, probably. We watched it for a few minutes, didn't see any young activity.
Is that tidal there or?
No, we're probably several miles away from the coast. That's fresh water. Yep. We did get out to the coast. I'll talk about that in a slide very quickly here. The biggest of the loons, the daddy of them all, is the yellow-billed loon. The world population is estimated to be under 10,000. They are definitely endangered, and they are one of the species that is taking it hard because of climate change. They are the largest loon, and our common loon comes in second to them. This is the largest loon. And we were able to see a pair of these swimming around on this lake. And they're the largest loon, so they have to have a pretty good size, pretty long enough lake for them to be able to take off on. Now, the unique story I can tell you here is that we went to the coast one day and we saw this yellow-billed loon trying to swim. He was dragging behind it a net. His legs were caught in the fisherman's net. These two gentlemen in the front were the tour guides. The gentleman on the left is the leading Canadian researcher in yellow-billed loons. He's been out in the field, tagging them, taking blood samples, doing this for the last several years. He knows his yellow-billed loons. Great guy, Ken White. We saw this. These guys kicked it into gear. We went down. We're knocking on little cabins, trying to find a boat to go out there. And we found a woman who let us use the boat. And they went out onto the water and rescued this loon. This is after we freed the loon. James is the gentleman there holding the loon after they cut away all the netting, and we released him, and he did take off, and he hooted and spread his wings, and he was diving normally afterwards. The sad part is when he pulled up the rest of the net, there was another yellow-billed loon, there was a red-throated loon, there was a Pacific loon dead in the net. So we were sad about that, and now we have to balance that with the fact that the native people there are subsistence living people. It's a shame that how they do their nets, string them out right near the shore, is a problem for the loons. We were able, I took this picture, I also took some video. We were able to, Ken, again, being one of the leading naturalists on that, brought this information to the village officers to educate them and hopefully try and start a conversation about a way that we can prevent this from happening. But yeah, very real, even up there, they have their bad, it's not bad enough. The climate can change, but they also deal with local issues as well. That's it for the birds. A couple mammals that I was able to see. Here is an Arctic fox. And it's brown in summer plumage. Normally in the wintertime, they'll be all white, mixing well with the snow. And they just go around looking for birds' nests to raid, and eggs and chicks. And then the other inhabitant that would normally be all white in wintertime is the Arctic hare. What you saw me, you see this all over the place out there in the tundra, and these are the cairns, which are just stacked stones, which they use to mark hunting locations, directionals, whatever the native people do to mark how they travel through the tundra. It's their signpost. And actually, the flag of Nunavut has a cairn in the shape of a cross on it. But again, one of the beautiful scenes of just looking out over the tundra, and there's Mount Pelly in the background, and lakes. The lakes are just dotted everywhere out there. Any questions?
All right, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to stop the share, and we might have a couple of questions here. All right, and first ones, okay. They like your photos. Yep,
Well, thank you, Gene.
yep. And okay, the other person likes the program. Do we have any questions from here in the audience?
How bad were the mosquitoes? From what I understand, they were not as bad as it could have been. I definitely, in the lower light situations in the dark, I definitely had a hat with a mask with a mosquito net on it, and I'm happy I did. There were a few times when I was looking out and I was just seeing black masks dots around me. Fortunately, we almost always had a nice breeze, and that kept off most of them. If it wasn't a breeze, it would have been a lot more difficult. But yeah, plenty of bug spray. I had my first layer was in theory an insect layer of cloth that they shouldn't be able to bite through. Not always true, but that plus my other shirts gave me great protection. And I think the only thing I ever got was a couple of bites on my ankle when they stuck in. Unfortunately, it wasn't. I was prepared for a lot worse.
You know what?
They're just used to it. They're used to it. They it's with them all over. You never see them wearing anything.
Yeah.
You may see them, wave their hand in front of their face a few times, but I didn't actually see a lot of Native people out in the tundra. They were all in town. But as we've been driving along, they do a lot of fishing. There's a couple of rivers that run through there, and you can see them out fishing. So I imagine most people have to deal with them, the mosquitoes by the water. But they didn't have anything. I think they're just accustomed to it.
How long were you there?
So I was there for, I was physically in Cambridge Bay for 4 days and 3 days in Yellowknife. Believe me, I would have loved to stay a lot longer. There was just so much else we could have done. But it was a nice first trip, and I would definitely go back again. So this, so this trip, I booked through a tour company. Their name is Eagle Eye Tours. There's 3 companies that I know that do go up there, and so depending upon the dates you're available. But I've used them before. I've been very happy with them. It's nice to find a company that you can trust and you've had good luck with. And I talk with other people who've traveled, and there are a couple other groups out there who do a good job as well. We had 12 people.
Yeah, the name of the tour group was Eagle Eye Tour.
Eagle Eye Tour. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. The question was, did I have to camp? No, we didn't have to. We didn't have to rough it. In both Yellowknife and Cambridge Bay, Yellowknife we were at one of the nicer hotels. But in Cambridge Bay, we were in a motel style where a bunch of rooms on one level, but we all had our rooms. Cambridge Bay, it's not just about the Native people up there. There's actually a NORAD base up there, and there's also a research facility up there, a Canadian research facility. So they are constantly getting workers through there who work at those stations and do their research. So they have several places that they do rent out year round.
Okay, somebody wants to know about the other birds of prey.
It's a good question. I actually didn't want to drag out my presentation too long, but it is interesting. We would have loved to have seen a snowy owl up there. It is possible, but we didn't see any snowy owls. And what we did see in the tundra was rough-legged hawks, a couple of rough-legged hawks, and some ravens. Ravens were big up there, and they were huge in Yellowknife. Lots of ravens in Yellowknife. So on the tundra, I would expect to have seen a snowy owl. Didn't see one. The rough-legged hawk definitely would be up there. In Yellowknife, outside the Arctic Circle, we saw a sharp-shin, a merlin, osprey, and a Cooper's, and a red tail.
Yeah.
But the numbers were, they weren't as many as I thought they'd see. I was surprised about that.
Of course, the Jaegers take part of that niche.
Exactly. Yeah, Jaegers and the
Gulls.
Glaucous gull
Yeah.
are big predators up there, and they easily fill that space that a typical hawk would down here.
All right. All right, well, thank you, Jeff. I
Thank you.
appreciate everybody. And go ahead and Jeff will be here in the center. And for everybody else, we really appreciate you tuning in. And this will be recorded and on our website for the next day. All right. So thank you, everyone.